Hello and welcome to the Blue Wave. Got a really good show for you guys today. Topics are going to include Montana Representative Zooey Zephyr suing the state over her removal from the House, and why I think that she has a really good chance of winning her suit based on historical precedents. We got Trump rape accuser E Jean Carrol saying that she didn't report the attack because she was ashamed. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think that it makes a lot of sense and why I believe that her story is credible. Trump to appear at CNN town hall hosted by Kaitlin Collins. Why I fear that the media is repeating the same mistakes that they made in 2016, which led to us getting Trump in the first place. Kevin McCarthy telling a Russian reporter, I don't support what Russia is doing to Ukraine. Why I believe it's a pretty significant sign of fracture within the Republican Party and versus some of the GOP MAGA far right wingers approach to the conflict. A survey saying that more than 40% of LGBTQ youth said they considered suicide in the past year, and how legislation is making that worse for LGBTQ people. And lastly, we're going to end with an ex-Bush White House chief of staff, Karl Rove, not getting the big picture when it comes to Trump and his support and his continued support from the Republican voter base during an interview that he did with Trey Gowdy. Okay, so starting off here, we're going to go ahead and pull up this article from AP, which says Montana Representative Zooey Zephyr sues over removal from House floor. Montana State Representative Zooey Zephyr asked the court Monday to allow her to return to the House floor after she was silenced and barred for chiding her Republican colleagues over legislation to restrict gender-affirming health care and for encouraging protesters. Attorneys for the first-term lawmaker sued in state district court in Helena on behalf of Zephyr, a transgender Democrat who represents a liberal district in the college town of Missoula, and several constituents who the attorneys said were being denied the right to adequate representation. Zephyr, whose comments in the Montana legislature have made her a prominent figure in transgender rights and in conversations about the muffling of dissent in state houses, said in a statement Monday that she and her constituents were targeted because I dared to give voice to the values and needs of transgender people like myself. So they're referencing other efforts to oust rowdy lawmakers, if you want to call them that. The two Justins in the Tennessee State House that were ousted, Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, for their support for a gun control protest that happened on the House floor, and they were eventually expelled from the House and have since been reinstated. This to me is a continuation of the GOP's strict, harsh repression of anything that dissents against their worldview. They're willing to bring down the hammer on people like Zooey Zephyr, and it's what makes her dissent and her hard-nosed fight against them all the more interesting. Right, because she's sort of setting up a blueprint for how to deal with being attacked by state legislators in the future, right? And she's setting up a blueprint of how to effectively respond and how to respond in a way that gets people onto her side of the argument, right? So it continues on here. This is a performance litigation. Political activism masquerading as a lawsuit, said Emily Flower, Constance press secretary. She said that a court decision blocking the legislature's censure of Zephyr would violate the separation of powers between the branches of government Murfitt said she would not comment on the lawsuit, and Ragers did not return telephone messages and an email seeking comment. So this little bit here at the end of the article that I like to read, this is just a little bit about some of the details of the case. GOP leaders, under pressure from hardline conservatives, silenced Zephyr from participating in the floor debates and demanded she apologize 2 weeks ago after she said that those who supported a ban on gender-affirming care for youths would have blood on their hands. Days later, she raised her microphone in defiance as demonstrators in the House gallery angrily demanded she be allowed to speak, leading to 7 arrests and Zephyr's banishment from the House floor. So this little bit here at the end of the article is what I want to point to you guys' attention to. So it says, attorneys for Zephyr noted previous legal disputes in which courts sided with politicians who made controversial comments, including a case that involved a conservative Oregon lawmaker's veiled threats against the state police. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals last year ruled that a requirement for Oregon Senator Brian Boquist to give 12 hours notice before coming to the state capitol violated his freedom of speech as an elected official and came as retaliation for his words. The attorneys also cited a 1966 U.S. Supreme Court case in which justices sided against Georgia lawmakers who tried to execute a newly elected lawmaker. Tried to exclude a newly elected lawmaker, not execute. That's a little bit step further. Julian Bond, who later became chair of the NAACP because he endorsed criticisms of the Vietnam War. So really interesting here. We have precedents of lawmakers being ousted for their defiant views on a topic that the state legislator largely disagreed with their views on. And they won. They won based on the Supreme Court ruling for this guy Brian Boquist, as well as Georgia lawmaker trying to exclude Julian Bond. So, given the precedence of lawmakers being ousted and the courts allowing them to be reinstated and the courts agreeing that their First Amendment right to freedom of speech is being impressed and imposed upon by state lawmakers, you really wonder what's going to happen with this case. I think it's really highly probable, if the courts are accurately interpreting the law, it seems to me like Zooey Zephyr has a pretty good legal argument here. And just the fact that she has the gall, as some would call it, to not only continue to do her work sitting outside in the hallways, in the lobby of the Capitol building in Montana, she's not just stopping there. She is using every avenue that she has to go after them legally. And from what it sounds here, she has a pretty solid case. All right. So we're going to keep an eye on Zooey Zephyr here. I don't think this is the last that we're going to hear of her. And I'm really interested to see how this court case plays out, given the historical precedence of courts siding with lawmakers' rights to express their freedom of speech that is granted to them in the First Amendment of the Constitution. All right. So we're going to be moving on here to E Jean Carrol. Says shameful feelings kept her from reporting alleged assault by Trump. Now, we all have our opinions about Trump. We all have heard and seen Trump do really crazy things and say outlandish things and just overall be kind of an aloof, bombastic guy. I don't think that most of America has any idea of just truly how evil Donald Trump is, just on a human level. Let's forget about his policy. Let's forget about his policies. Just on a human level, Trump is evil, and it's because of shit like this. Okay, so it says, columnist E Jean Carrol, testifying Monday in her civil defamation and battery case against former President Trump, told the jury she didn't report the alleged attack to police because she felt it was shameful to do so. Carrol, who brought the lawsuit in November, alleges that Trump defamed her in a 2022 Truth Social post by calling her allegations a hoax and a lie, and saying, "This woman is not my type," when he denied her claim that Trump raped her in a Bedford Goodman department store dressing room in the 1990s. She added a charge of battery under a recently adopted New York law that allows adult survivors of sexual abuse to sue their alleged attackers regardless of the statute of limitations. Trump has denied all allegations that he raped Carrol or defamed her. Asked by her attorney, Michael Ferrara, why she never went to the authorities, Carrol said, "Because Donald Trump was very powerful. First of all, I wouldn't go to the police. It was shameful to go to the police," Carrol said. "Donald Trump had too much power. I didn't think the police would take me seriously." Now, this just makes me think that if we had not had the whole Me Too movement sparked by allegations against Harvey Weinstein in 2018, right? Does E Jean Carrol ever come forward about this? Ever? Or is this something that is completely lost to history? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the Me Too movement, the success that it's had, it has very tangible effects in the world for survivors of these horrible, horrific acts. And E Jean Carrol not backing down and deciding that she is going to speak out against Trump and not be intimidated. It's very brave. It's very remarkable. And in a world where Trump had so much power and influence and recognition and money and stature prior to him becoming president, you can only imagine the amount of courage it takes for a woman to come out against a man who has the amount of power and stature that Trump did prior to him becoming president. But now that he was elected president in 2016, it makes this case all the more interesting. And to me, it really is the landmark case of the Me Too movement of this year. And it is I think you can draw a direct line of E Jean Carrol's allegations against Trump to the 2018 Me Too movement. Earlier Monday, under cross-examination by defense attorney Joe Tapachina, Carrol also said she didn't report the alleged attack because as a woman born in the 1940s, she's a member of the silent generation that didn't speak up about such things. The exchange came after Tapachina introduced several of her advice columns for Elle magazine, in which she suggested that her readers call police in the event of a sexual assault or threat. There are numerous times when you've advised your readers to call the police, despite Carrol never reporting her own alleged rape to police, Tapachina said to Carrol. In most cases, I advise my readers to go to police, Carrol replied. I was born in 1943. I'm a member of the silent generation. Women like me were taught to keep our chins up and not complain. The fact that I never went to police is not surprising for someone my age. I would have rather done anything than call the police. The answer was stricken from the record as non-responsive to the question posed, but the exchange continued the defense's questioning of Carrol's actions following the alleged assault and their suggestions that her behavior, not going to police, not seeking security camera footage, continuing to shop at Bergford's, is odd with how other sex assault victims might behave. Tapachina asked Carrol about her shopping habits, saying, "You've made many purchases at Bedford since 1995 to 96. So Trump's defense is they're trying to draw up this defense of, well, you could have gone to the police, you could have done something, you didn't do anything about it. But here's the thing. Almost no women did during this time. Almost no women did, because what it meant for them was ostracization, and it meant losing your friends and your community and your family in many cases, especially if you're accusing a man that has power to influence opinion. It's not like just because women were reporting these things happening way less during this time than they do today, that doesn't mean that the crimes were happening less. It just means that the societal implications of reporting such a crime were the book was so stacked against women that they decided that it wasn't worth it in many cases. It wasn't worth the trouble, and it was going to make their situation worse in many ways. Worse, not better. So I don't buy the argument that she didn't report it right away when it happened, so it must not have happened, right? I just don't buy that. Not one bit. See if there's anything else here in this article that I want to show you guys. Basically just goes over, just Joe Tapakina. They're trying to pin her on, you didn't report it. You didn't report it. But like I said, that does not necessarily mean that the crime didn't happen, because women across the board, reported these crimes at a far less frequent rate than they do today. And especially against somebody of Donald Trump's stature at the time. So that's all I got for you guys on this one. We're going to go ahead and move on to Trump to appear at a CNN town hall in New Hampshire. We got another example here of the mainstream media refusing to learn the lessons that they should have learned in 2016. They're just refusing to really be realistic with how much they impacted public discourse surrounding the election. So guys, former President Donald Trump will participate in a CNN presidential town hall next week in New Hampshire. CNN this morning anchor Kaitlin Collins will moderate the event at St. Anselm College, which will air at 9 p.m. Eastern on May 10th and will feature the former president taking questions from New Hampshire Republicans and undeclared voters who plan to vote in the 2024 GOP presidential primary. This will be Trump's first appearance on CNN since the 2016 presidential campaign. So CNN, they get sold last year, and they basically decide, you know what, we're gonna be right in the middle. The news is too polarized. We got news stations that are on the far left. We got news stations that are on the far right. What the American people want, they want something in the middle, which translates to, we're going to have a liberal opinion, we're going to have a conservative opinion, and we're just going to leave it at that. We're just going to let the conservatives say their piece, and we're going to let them have a platform, and we're going to let them have an avenue in which to speak to voters who are not as polarized as people maybe watching Fox News or Newsmax or OAN. Why allow it? Why give Trump the platform to continue to lie and lie and lie to the American people? It's like, does CNN think that Trump is suddenly gonna just stop talking about how the 2020 election was rigged during their town hall? I don't think so. I think it's exactly what Trump is going to continue to talk about. And CNN, in their quest for, we're going to appeal to the left and the right and be right in the middle, what they're doing is they're giving a platform to beliefs that have no place being platformed in the mainstream media whatsoever. Okay? Like, Fox News just got rid of Tucker Carlson because his claims have become so outlandish that they can't defend them in a court of law. And they can't afford to continue to have Tucker lie night after night after night. And it's like, what's going to be the next lawsuit, right? What's going to be the next thing that Tucker lies about that is very obviously a lie, and there's evidence to show that it's a lie, that we get sued about? So CNN, it's like, what are you guys doing? They're in a quest for ratings, in a quest for eyeballs on their channel. They don't seem to be realizing the damage that they are doing to American politics in general. And they're just completely failing to recognize their role in getting Trump elected by giving him billions and billions of dollars of free media coverage, of free advertising. That's what it was, free advertising. I remember this one time in 2016 when CNN was showing Trump's empty podium as he was walking up to give a speech. They were showing his empty podium over a Bernie Sanders rally with tens of thousands of people packed, screaming, and very enthusiastic about their candidate. And I remember thinking, wow, this is really who these guys are. They don't really care about accurately giving the American people an accurate picture of politics. They just want whatever is going to give them the most ratings on a night-to-night basis, even if that means platforming lies and platforming a president who incited an insurrection against our country. I just don't really understand what CNN's play is here. And I think that much like a lot of their programming decisions that they've made in terms of, we're going to appeal to a wider base of people, it's going to backfire. Giving Trump another platform in the form of a town hall is going to backfire on them, much like a lot of their programming decisions over the past year have backfired on them. Okay, so moving on here, we got Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House, telling a Russian reporter, "I do not support what your country has done to Ukraine." Now, this is interesting given the far right MAGA wing of the party, including members like Boebert, Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz. There's others. They're slipping my mind at the moment. But you guys know the far right MAGA wing. They constantly talk about how we can't be giving these handouts to Ukraine. Like, we got to worry about our own people at home. People in America are going hungry. People in America need those billions of dollars, not Ukraine. Totally failing to realize that the Ukrainians and their courage fighting Russia is keeping a wider conflict in which could hurt America far worse economically than the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine. That us funding Ukraine is keeping the conflict contained to Ukraine. and it's not spilling over into other Baltic states in Europe and perhaps embolden Putin to attack a NATO country, triggering an Article 5 response from NATO. That's not what anybody wants. But McCarthy here, he is not in agreement with his own party, members of his own party, at least. So it says McCarthy shot down a Russian reporter's suggestion that he does not support aid to Ukraine, pledging continued U.S. support for the country and calling on Russia to pull its troops from Ukraine. No, I vote for aid for Ukraine. I support aid for Ukraine. I do not support what your country has done to Ukraine. I do not support your killing of the children either, McCarthy said at a news conference in Israel on Monday. I mean, man. For a guy like Kevin McCarthy, who's just kind of on all ways that we could define him, kind of a weasel. It kind of seems like that guy in high school. This is what Kevin McCarthy reminds me of. He reminds me of that guy in high school that is willing to like say that they're friends or that they don't like a certain group of people around a group to gain their favor, to gain their liking, and then go to the other group of people that he was just disparaging and tell that group of people that, oh no, it's the other group of people that he was originally with, that they're the losers. You know what I mean? He just doesn't have any like principles or anything that he like really truly deep down believes in. This is actually, I'll give Kevin McCarthy credit where it's due. I don't hand out very much credit to any Republicans, but I credit McCarthy. It's a forceful statement of support for Ukraine. For him to say, I do not support what you guys are doing to Ukraine directly in that sort of way. Well, there's not much of a way for the Kremlin to spin this. If he had said, oh, I don't support what you guys are doing to the country, but I don't know about if we should be giving Ukraine all this money or something. No, he said, I vote for aid. I support Ukraine. Just in stark contrast to the MAGA wing of his own party, which he needed their votes to become speaker in the first place. I think for one standpoint, you should pull out. I don't think it's right. And we will continue to support because the rest of the world sees it just as it is. The Russian reporter had said that he knows Kevin McCarthy does not support the current unlimited and uncontrolled supplies of weaponry and aid to Ukraine, asking if it was possible that U.S. policy on sending aid to Ukraine could change in the near future. It was an apparent reference to McCarthy saying last year that there would be no blank check to Ukraine in a House GOP majority, while not ruling out any future support for Ukraine. McCarthy defended his statement at the time. I think Ukraine is very important. I support making sure that we move forward to defeat Russia in that program, but there should be no blank check on anything. We are $31 trillion in debt. A minority of Republicans in the narrow majority who are resistant to U.S. foreign intervention have been critical of sending additional aid to Ukraine. Even among the Republicans who support continued military assistance, some have questioned non-military economic aid. So this is interesting. Just not too long ago, we got McCarthy kind of saying, but there should be no blank check on anything. There should be no blank check. So that's what this Russian reporter was basing his original assumption that McCarthy was not supportive of continued funding of Ukraine on, right? Because that's got to be what he was going off of, because McCarthy's never really said anything other than that in terms of, oh, we're not going to fund Ukraine. But now he's saying, no, I vote for aid for Ukraine. So I think we might be seeing perhaps the political calculations of this continued support of Ukraine changing in McCarthy's mind somewhat, to the point that he thinks that, no, he does need to say that he is going to continue to vote for aid for Ukraine, whether or not it's he could just be saying that it's not going to be a blank check to kind of convince the people in his own party, the voters in his own party, that maybe there is something to not funding as much, but at the same time, he's saying he is going to continue to vote for aid for Ukraine. So I'm not sure what that means to, we're not going to write them a blank check, but I do support them. It seems like his a little bit of contradiction going on here. And I think that that's basically what it points to, is a change in the political calculus of the support of Ukraine. And it's going to be interesting to see whether or not the far-right MAGA wing is going to be willing to withhold their votes on certain House bills that are passed, or not passed, but bills that are brought to the floor, if the Republicans are going to be willing to withhold their votes based on funding for the Ukraine invasion, even when most in their own party do see the value of continuing to support Ukraine. So just another interesting example of the dysfunction and the not on the same team sort of aspect that we're seeing within the modern GOP, and how these guys are willing to eat each other up real quick if it means any sort of political gain for themselves. Whereas it's in stark contrast to the Democratic Party, who is steadfastly 100% supportive of continuing to fund Ukraine. You don't have any Democrats saying that it's not a good idea to continue to fund Ukraine. So just an interesting little contrast there. Moving on here, we got in an annual survey, more than 40% of LGBTQ youth said that they considered suicide in the past year. Gosh. And the anti-LGBTQ legislation was making it worse. Shameless. The modern GOP is shameless. Says the Trevor Project, a nonprofit that works to prevent suicide among LGBTQ youth, interviewed more than 28,000 people for its annual survey. Damn, that's a big sample size. This isn't a survey of 1,000 or a few hundred people. 28,000 people. Wow. More than 40% of LGBTQ youth said they considered suicide in the last year, the survey revealed. Respondents said laws passed on the state level and public lobbying at the national level has worsened their mental health. A disturbingly high percentage of respondents to an annual survey of LGBTQ youth in the United States said that they seriously considered attempting suicide in the last year, and they blame anti-LGBTQ laws and policies for their worsening mental health. So you got already a group of people who struggle with accepting themselves. They struggle with being normal kids in a lot of ways, because they have so much of society telling them that their views and their sexuality and who they feel attraction for is wrong because of the Bible or whatever other reason the GOP comes up with in their head to ostracize gay people. It's already such a marginalized group, and And there's been progress that's been made ever since the 2015 Supreme Court decision that legalized gay marriage in all 50 states in the United States of America. We've seen progress since then. We've seen the rise of pride parades. We've seen the rise of overall acceptance of LGBTQ, and the Republicans don't like it. They don't like it. They don't like that the LGBTQ people are being happy or feeling accepted for their beliefs. They can't stand it. They can't stand it because deep down, these GOPers don't like themselves deep down. So they have to make other people, they have to bring down other people to their level to feel better about themselves. That's all these laws are about. That's all it is. It's, let's find a way to bring down others. They're up here, we're down here. We're going to bring them down to our level. And so that we can feel better at where we're at with our acceptance of our identities. It's just really terrible shit. It really, really makes you wonder, why does anybody that is under the age of 35, why does anybody vote for the GOP when all they've shown that they want to do is take rights away, suppress people, make gay people disappear in our society, disappear from public representation. That is insane. 40% of LGBTQ youth said that they considered suicide. This isn't LGBT youth that are feeling marginalized or have had anxious thoughts or have depression or considered suicide. And that anti-LGBT legislation was making it worse. Why don't we want to make things better for them? Why don't we want to make this country a better place, not a worse place? It's just crazy. In a country that loves to, the Republicans love to pat themselves on the freaking back about how America is the greatest country in the world, and we have been the best country since World War II, and capitalism this, capitalism that. 40% of LGBTQ youth considering suicide is not acceptable in the United States of America. It is not acceptable. And the GOP, they should be ashamed of themselves for the evil vitriol that they have poisoned millions and millions of people with across this country. They should be ashamed of themselves based on reports like this one. All right, moving on here. Lastly here, we got Karl Rove, who is a ex-Bush administration official, going on an interview on Fox News with a Trey Gowdy, and not really seeming like modern American politics is exactly clicking in his head. He gets about 80% of what he says here is accurate, and his advice for GOP candidates who want to attack Trump, it actually, I think, is pretty sound. But what he's failing to realize is the calculus of why GOP candidates either don't want to, or have failed to, or have no interest in attacking Trump in any sort of meaningful, tangible, sustained way. So, really fascinating stuff here. Let's go ahead and dive into the video.
So how do we make sense of this? A majority of Americans do not want a rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but Biden is running again and will be the nominee, and Trump is running again and is the overwhelming front runner for the Republican nomination. People claim they want change, they want new and different choices, and yet the same candidates are renominated time and time again. Joining us now to discuss is former White House Chief of Staff for President George W. Bush, Mr. Karl Rove. Welcome to you, Karl. All right, help me reconcile those. They seem inconsistent. People say they don't want a rematch of 2020, and yet both Biden and Trump are the current front runners. So how do we make sense of that?
Well, they're the most familiar faces around, and it's the beginning of the contest. Remember, at this point in 2000, in the 2003-2004 election, leading into the Iowa caucuses, Howard Dean was ahead. In 2008, Hillary Clinton was ahead. In 2004, 2012, Newt Gingrich was ahead going into.
Howard Dean, Hillary Clinton, and Newt Gingrich also weren't elected president. They also didn't win the presidency prior to them running a second campaign. So, not exactly sure what his point is there, but sure they weren't ahead at, you know what I mean? Sure, they were leading. I mean, they were leading at one point, but they weren't president.
So there's right now, these are the two most visible people in the electorate, and you're right. People do not want them to run again. Take a look at the Monmouth poll. Among Democrats, only 25% would prefer that Biden run again. 44% said they would prefer that he step aside. That's how that's the word that they use, prefer. And 30% said they had no preference. Those are the people who are being polite, who are really thinking more like the 44%. In the AP National Opinion Research poll, 27% of all Americans said, yes, I want Joe Biden to run again. 73% no. There were similar numbers. 70% said we don't want Donald Trump to run again. So if I were a betting man, I'd put money on Trump and Biden to be the nominees, but I would bet on the field against them, because I think that sentiment is only going to grow. People are not going to get more excited about either one of these two choices.
People may not be getting more excited, but people might not have a choice when the rubber hits the road. So he cites, only 25% of Democrats saying that they want Joe Biden to run. But what I'm thinking here is that if it is a rematch of Trump and Biden, which it's looking like it's going to be, how many of those 75% who said they didn't want Biden to run, how many of them are going to allow Trump back into office by not voting for Biden, or that they don't want Biden to run so bad they're willing to vote for third party or stay home? You know what I mean? Those things don't equal each other. I would wager that 9 out of 10 Democrats who are saying right now that they don't want Biden, they will vote for him. They will. And I believe that the Republican backlash against Trump, I don't know if you want to call, I don't know, backlash is the word, but certain Republican opposition to Trump seems to be even higher than any sort of opposition from Democrats to Biden. So I really don't necessarily think that this 25% number of only 25% of Democrats want Biden to run. Okay, so what?
All right, Carl. To get to Congress, you have to win a couple of neighborhoods. To get to the White House, you got to win the Electoral College. What states that Republicans lost the last time around do you think would really be in play in 2024? I mean, where can they pick up Electoral College votes?
Well, we had a couple of states that were very narrow, and Arizona and Georgia in particular, and Wisconsin to a lesser extent. All three of those could. But look, this is going to depend on the candidates. My view is if it's Joe Biden and Donald Trump, Joe Biden is likely to win unless the concerns about age grow and our concerns about Kamala Harris grow.
Concerns about age and Trump is, almost as old as Biden. he's slightly younger than Biden, but let's keep talking about Biden's age, I guess.
But if it is Biden against virtually any other Republican, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin are going to flip, and then probably some other states like Pennsylvania and Nevada, which was very close, and New Hampshire, which was close.
Also, we have Karl Rove here stating that worries about Kamala Harris are going to somehow drive the American people to not vote for Biden. But let's just look at some of the people that Trump has been flirting with in his mind, at least reportedly, considering to be his GOP running mate in 2024. And we got figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Carrie Lake. The American people are not going to be concerned about having people who deny the sacredness of American elections and would deny and subvert the voice of millions and millions of people at the drop of a hat. Do we want somebody like that being one heartbeat away, one heartbeat away from the presidency? I mean, seriously, are there independent voters out there? Are they more concerned with Kamala Harris or a figure like Carrie Lake?
There's going to be some play in this electoral map, but only if it's a different face, because Wisconsin are going to flip, and then probably some other states like Pennsylvania and Nevada, which was very close, and New Hampshire, which was close. So there's going to be some play in this electoral map, but only if it's a different face, because people know who Trump is, people don't know who Biden is. Both of them have their detractors, and they also have their detractors inside their own party. In the Associated Press National Opinion Research poll, 19% of Democrats and 29% of Republicans said they would not support their nominee if they were respectively Biden and Trump. That's a real problem if either party nominates those people, in that there are going to be a bunch of people inside the party who are saying, you know what, Biden's too old, Trump is too controversial, we need to turn the page. And the party that turns the page, I think, is going to have the upper hand in 2024.
All right, you have.
But we're going to. He's saying that they're going to have people turning away from the Democratic Party based on not wanting Biden to run. It's like Biden already beat Trump by 7 million votes. 7 million votes he won by already. Who's lost more support since 2020? Is it Biden or Trump? Who incited an insurrection against the United States and was impeached and has endorsed several people who went on to lose in 2022. Where are these Democrats that are defecting to the point that they're not going to vote for Biden? Where are they? I mean, I get people being concerned about his age. I get people being concerned about some of his perceived gaffes. But when the rubber hits the road, I truly believe that 9 out of 10 people who call themselves Democrats can see the writing on the wall and their potential desire to have somebody else be running, that doesn't mean that they're not going to vote for him. Okay, because like Biden says, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. Compare me to the alternative. I believe that that's what many American people did in 2020, myself included. I didn't vote for Biden in the primaries. I voted for Bernie Sanders. Did I vote for Joe Biden in the presidential election? You bet your ass I did. Okay.
Forgotten more about this than I will ever know. I take your word that all the names you just called were the front runners, and they
rewind it a bit.
All right, you have forgotten more about this than I will ever know. I take your word that all the names you just called were the front runners, and they wound up not being the nominee. It seems like President Trump's lead is pretty prohibitive right now, but what do challengers need to do to make a race of this on the GOP side?
Yeah. Well, first they need to articulate a vision that says, I am change and I'm new and different. I've been a successful governor or successful senator. I've been a successful leader in private sector. And I've got a vision for the future that causes you to say, you know what, that sounds good. Second of all, they've got to deal with President Trump. They've got to say, you know what, you did a lot of good.
The Republicans have to become a party of policy and of legislation and of legislative success. A party of champion legislative success and policy. Yeah. Sorry, Carl, but don't see it happening, bud.
And I've got a vision for the future that causes you to say, you know what, that sounds good. Second of all, they've got to deal with President Trump. They've got to say, you know what, you did a lot of good things, but you got baggage. You got baggage in the fact that you've been indicted for things. You may be indicted for more things, that you're a controversial figure, and that you failed to do things. You said you'd build the wall. Well, when you came into office, here's how long the wall was. When you left office, it wasn't much longer. You said you'd take on China, and you proclaimed that you got this fantastic treaty with China to buy a bunch of our American agricultural products, and it didn't happen. You did nothing to attack China on the issue of stealing our intellectual property, of stealing our ideas and manufacturing processes and science and technology. You didn't do anything about that. So I appreciate the good things you did, but frankly, we need new leadership that's actually going to get things done, and I've got a demonstrated record in doing that. They're not going to be able to tiptoe around them. They've got to deal with them head on. And they've got to say, the American people want more than a rerun of 2020, which is exactly where the American people are, as virtually every poll is showing us. Yes, these men have their supporters. Yes, these men have their detractors. But more important than that is we've been governed for 32 years by members of the greatest generation. And the idea of an 82-year-old and a 78-year-old battling out for the White House is not people's idea of what they want to see.
Okay, so here's the thing. Karl Rove's advice to potential candidates, it's not terrible advice. Those would be decent talking points to at least start attacking Trump. I mean, at least try. But here's the thing. People in the GOP care about their future political prospects and milking the political system for every dollar that they can milk out of it and grifting as much as they possibly can grift off of the MAGA supporters. They care about that more than winning elections now, I believe. They really do. They care about hurting liberal feelings. They care about sucking up to whatever Trump's spat out on Truth Social for the morning. And they care about feeling superior and feeling like they're right and feeling like their little small worldview is true. And Trump reinforces their beliefs and tells them it's okay to have these beliefs. It's okay to have them out loud. You don't have to keep them in anymore. Because other people agree with you. Look at all these people that agree with you. Look at me. I'm the president. I'm agreeing with your beliefs. I'm reinforcing them back to you. That is the appeal of Trump to many voters. It's not any one policy. It's not any one thing that he did in the White House. It's simply what he represents as an affront to liberal America. It's basically them sticking up their finger to liberal America and going, screw you. We don't care about progressing this country. We want to take it back to a time when white people had all the power. That's what they want. They want power. They want control. They want to hurt lib feelings. They don't care about, a candidate with this policy would appeal to X amount more voters. And I got a couple of statistics here to wrap up the show that's going to prove exactly my point. So we got Fox News brass might be unnerved. Why the Fox News brass might be unnerved after seeing the ratings in the aftermath of Tucker Carlson's firing. So if we had a base of the MAGA wing that was wanting to go back to substantive policy debate whenever the GOP debated policy, not in my lifetime. I'm not sure if it ever happened. If it did, I'm gonna have to go and learn about that. I guess it was back in the 70s, really. It was before Reaganism might be the last time that the Republicans even debated any policy. But I digress. My point is that if there was a huge base of people in the Republican voter base that were itching for this return to substantial policy debates, why is our Fox News's ratings cratering after Tucker Carlson was fired? You would think that you would see a relief or an expression of joy. Yes, we can be past this fear-mongering, be past the conspiracy theories, be past lying about the 2020 election, be past worrying about every single one of Trump's grievances and amplifying his grievances with a megaphone every single night. But no. It says when Brian Kilmeade filled in on Monday evening for Carlson, who spent years as the unquestionable ratings king at Fox News, the channel drew an average of 2.6 million viewers and 294,000 in the key advertiser-coveted 25 to 54 demographic, according to Nielsen Media Research. That's very good by normal cable standards. It's even good by Fox News standards, but in context of the numbers that his predecessor regularly posted, it was a noticeable dip. Compare Kilmeade's Monday ratings to the previous start of the weeks in which Carlson helmed the hour. When Carlson hosted on April 17th, he averaged 3.2 million total viewers and 445,000 in the key demographic. On April 10th, Carlson averaged 3.1 million viewers and 438,000 in the key demographic. And on April 3rd, Carlson averaged 3.2 million total voters. So these people, they're not just suddenly, we're not going to stop watching the news. I'm just going to tune out of all my conspiracy theory stuff. I'm just going to, now that Tucker's not giving it to me, I guess I'm not going to listen to that stuff anymore. No, they're going to fucking follow Tucker wherever the fuck he goes and continue to listen to his conspiracy theories. Or they're going to go to a different show with other people peddling other conspiracy theories. Because that's what makes them feel good. That's when they go find the media to participate in an act of confirmation bias. They go and find media that confirms their beliefs and regurgitates them back to themselves. That's it. If what Karl Rove was saying here, that, we need to start carving out attack angles on Trump and saying, hey, he did good things, but there's too much controversy surrounding him. No, they love the controversy. They love it. It's what engaged them in the political process and got them behind Trump in the first place. Right? So Karl Rove he's just kind of not really looking at the full picture of why Trump is supported as much by the Republicans as he is. He's failing to realize why his support is so ravenous. And one last article I got here for you guys. 2/3 of Republicans still don't believe Biden was elected legitimately. Now, this is a little bit dated from October 25th, 2022. But I think the statistics still illustrate my point. New polling from NBC News shows just 22% of registered Republican voters believe in the legitimacy of Biden's election, with 65% viewing his election as illegitimate. 65% viewing his election as illegitimate. If you're a Republican in the modern GOP, there's no angle for you to attack Trump because 65% still think that he should be the rightful president and that he did win the election. They don't see a problem with Trump's continued grievances being amplified and his turning off of more middle of the pack voters and independents who, by the way, sway presidential elections every single election. They basically decide who is the president, independent voters. If you're if you're trying to make a name for yourself in the modern GOP, saying that the election was legitimate and saying that, saying the clear fact that Biden is in fact president and Biden did in fact legitimately, legally win the election, well, you're turning yourself off to the 65% of the Republican voter base. Come on, Karl Rove. If you're trying to appeal to the Republican voter base, you're going to appeal to their beliefs that they widely hold. So it's like, the Republicans are now in a conundrum of they have to, in order to win the primary, they have to adopt Trump's talking points. They have to say that the 2020 election was stolen in order to attract a sufficient number of voters to win the primary in the first place. So you have an issue where the most popular candidates that garner the most votes and garner the most attention from GOP voters are the ones with the most outspoken, wildest, conspiracy riddled beliefs. You have to appeal to those voters to even get your foot in the door. It's just the math. It's just the math here. You can't win a primary with 22% support by saying the election was legitimate when your primary opponent is going to say that the election was illegitimate and they're going to get the 65%. So there's not really any angle to come at Trump in a consistent way without pissing off a huge number of the GOP. And I think this is why we've seen such half-hearted measures from Ron DeSantis, where they know that they need the Trump voters' support, so they're kind of like not head-on attacking Trump, kind of hoping that the law handles him or that people do get fed up with his scandals and they go, oh, look, there's this DeSantis guy here. He hasn't said anything bad about Trump. He hasn't said anything bad about the election being legitimate. So I guess we'll go over and vote for him. He's close enough to Trump. He's not exactly Trump, but he's close enough. That's the ploy that the DeSantis campaign is making. Now, I don't think it's going to work ultimately because Trump's support has only gone up since he's been indicted. Up. And if he was to be indicted in the Georgia case for election crimes that were committed during his call with Brad Raffensperger, as well as other election officials, I postulate and I predict that we might see even more, his support even go higher than the Alvin Bragg indictment, just based on the merits of the case being focused on the 2020 election, which they overwhelmingly think was stolen. So, Karl Rove here, my man, you gotta kind of wake up and smell the coffee and realize that maybe in normal politics land, taking the approach that he laid out in that interview might be a good idea, might be something that would be effective, might get somebody some, you know, a little bit up there in the polls. But here's the problem, Karl Rove. We don't live in normal politics land in the United States of America in 2023. And that's going to be where I end this show. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next one. All right? Peace.